Okay, for our next one, I am gonna do the opposite of orange. Well, no, I won't. I'll do near opposite. I'm gonna do just blue, which if we're using the subtractive color wheel, if you mix cyan and magenta, which are the primaries, then this secondary color is gonna be what we just call blue. So for this one, we need a little bit of both. They're both somewhat dark values, so we might need sort of kind of equal amounts. So we'll just go ahead and start mixing. And if you want to see closer to what that magenta color looks like, that's what it is. And then with this one, it looks different. The reason I'm pushing it out here is that they look different than the color that is in a big glob. The thicker the paint, the more dark the color. And so you might be surprised at how very, very bright those two are. And that's good. We need them to be really brilliant and bright, super saturated, so that we get nice saturated colors. All right, so just kind of start mixing, and you mix until you feel like you might have something similar to, again, like what's the middle between magenta, this magenta, and that blue. Now, I wouldn't so much look at these dark globs. I would look at the thin versions so you can really see. And then even this, you might need to actually thin it out, since that's closer to what it's going to look like on your paper, and see. They were fairly equal amounts, and I'm actually going to say that I think this is a go. I feel like this is, well, it's actually probably more, this is actually more violet. This would be perfect if it was for violet. I'm going to go for more blue to make it actually. We're going to need a lot of blue. I didn't calculate this well because it's needs to feel more like blue than magenta. Okay, so now what's happening is, if I look at, I'm going to show you this a little bit closer again. That magenta, this particular cyan, and then this is actually closer to the value. It's basically like what we would consider a blue purple. That's pretty close to it. I feel like I could live with that. They could have a little bit more blue in it, but not by much. So definitely not equal amounts in the end, far more blue. And that's okay. All right, so now that I have those, now I'm gonna do what I did before. We're gonna make our tint, our tone, our shade, and our desaturated color with the opposite. In this case, the opposite is actually yellow, because it's purple enough. You'll see why. Basically, if you think about what the opposites could be, it needs to be a color that doesn't already exist within here. We have magenta, we have cyan. There's no yellow if we think about those three primaries. So that's why it has to be something with yellow in it in order to desaturate it and or kind of sort of make it brown, right? So let me do a smaller brush for the rest of this. And I just need, like before, dab of white, a little bit of black. Whoops, too much, honestly. And then that gray that I mixed before, I'm gonna reuse that. Okay, don't need much. And then from each, we'll just pull some of this color in. Now, if you remember how light our orange was, remember that this blue is a really dark color. It's gonna push this really quickly, and so we might not need as much color as we needed for the other one. So what I'm doing now is I have to look at what I did last time and decide if that's close enough. Based on what I'm looking at here and here, it's okay. I don't know that it, yeah, I think it's totally fine. So on the color wheel, I need to figure out where this would go. So this would be yellow. Yellow is opposite from this particular blue, so this is where I need to be for this one. And then I need to make sure that I'm actually putting it in the tone areas, which are these two little guys here. So this is where this goes, right there. You're gonna have to reference your subtractive color wheel pretty frequently to make sure that you get it accurately. And you know what, after these dry, if you're really not happy with the way that the colors look, you can always go back and redo them. This is why we are saving all of your mixed paint, so that it's not a big deal if you need to go back. I can already tell as it's coming down, it looked okay, but paint actually, when it dries, it darkens. And so I can already kind of see as it's hitting the paper and drying that it might be just a little bit too dark. And that's okay. Again, I could go ahead and just add more gray right now, but I think I'll just wait and see how it all kind of ends up before I putter around like that. For the tint, again, the color white is really affected quickly, so we probably don't need a tremendous amount of that blue color to get it to go to that tint color that we need. And again, we're going to reference this color that we already did before to try to get it to be a similar value. When in doubt, I just make it a little bit lighter. I think that's pretty good. And again, just make sure that it's in the right section. If you mess up on any of these, remember, just make another copy, or you might not even have to make a whole new, if you're tracing them that way, just, you know, trace out a couple new sections on a new piece of paper. And again, just cut the pieces out and glue it on top. Or cut the piece out and simply slide it in, but that actually might be a little bit more work. So I would say just glue it on top. So yeah, it's not bad. Again, it's hard to tell until you get them all into place sometimes as to which ones might need a little bit less or a little bit more color, but that's not terrible. It's just, again, remembering that the dark ones cause the lighter colors to shift more dramatically. And then in this case, because the color is actually quite dark, when I'm going to do the pure color now before I put the other colors down, just so you can see what that looks like. It's a dark color. And so for this one, you want to make sure that you don't overdo it. You don't want this to be doubled up with a lot of layers, because if you do that, the color will just look too close to black, in my opinion. This is actually getting just a tiny bit dry, so I'm going to have to add a little bit of water to it. Yeah, I should have added water sooner. Oh well, it's going to be a little bit streaky. It's not the end of the world. And just do your best to be as careful as you can. But although part of the grade, I mean, if it's horribly messy and looks like a 2-year-old did it, then of course that'll affect your grade. But overall, for presentation purposes, as long as it looks somewhat good, decent from a distance, I'm just only seeing your photograph, right? So just do your best. Okay, so that's enough. But you can see, even from across the way, this is obviously way darker than this orange. And that's just the way colors are. Nothing we can do about that. Except to add white, but then that's a tint. So it's going to be true to the nature of these things. Now, this is the tricky one, in my opinion, is the shade, because we're starting with a dark color. Adding a little bit of of water, because this is drying on me really fast for some reason. Just a titch of black. If you look over here, this, just a tiny little bit of black, and it's already looking, it's already pretty dramatically different. I can tell already, like in this case, I did too much, right? I almost went straight black. So this is like, again, you just put the smallest amount of black in here. And yeah, there we go. All right, so this isn't a large section, remember, but you'll see the most drama in terms of shade colors when it's when the black is mixed with a light color. So anything in those that has yellow in it, the oranges, the yellows, the yellow greens, even the greens to a certain extent, will certainly be affected more. And then for the desaturated color, in this instance we're going to use yellow because that's the opposite on the color wheel for the subtractive color wheel. Remember, if you're used to the traditional color wheel, you're gonna you might get a little messed up. So I would definitely keep that subtractive color wheel handy. And it's not, honestly not too different, right? If you think about a traditional color wheel, if you used it before, the opposite of purple is yellow. Well, this is pretty much the traditional color purple, instead of what we would call blue. And so, yeah. So you can see, even with that tiny bit that I have left, it's already shifting it pretty far. It's like browny. It's not quite perfectly brown, but it is really locking in color. A little bit at a time. There, it's finally feeling a little bit. There you go. Okay, a dab of water so I can actually paint with it. And again, it's looking really close to that. This versus this is not much different. And that's okay. Some of them are going to be dramatic, different again. Some of them just won't. You just kind of have to be patient as you figure that stuff out. It's easy to start to get messy when you get tired. So if you are, feeling a bit tired, you might want to take a little break. But do always remember that you might need to add some water to these paints because I'm not even in the warmest of rooms right now. I'm at school in my office, but these paints are so thin that they dry really fast. So there we go. The more you do, the faster they go, honestly. So typically, this is the way that I think works best for doing the color wheels rather than, I did these on opposite spectrums just because I wanted to show you a dark versus a lighter value. Starting with one with the pure saturated hue. However, if this was my color wheel, I would start with the primaries, do those first, let them dry out, and then do the secondaries and let them dry out. The reason is because it's nice to have a reference color as you're starting to do these. You'll be able to mix the color better. You can see what I was doing on here is showing you the color and then figuring out the middle. That is okay too. But you do not have to go in any kind of circular order or clockwise or counterclockwise. You can just do primaries, then secondaries, and then tertiaries. So that's that. Let me know if you have any questions, if you're getting stuck on something. Feel free to set up a time to Zoom.